This is the Modern Mastery Unleashed podcast.
Do you feel like you procrastinate? Do you identify as a perfectionist? Are you struggling with consistency? These are all things that we are hearing from our community over at the Modern Self Mastery Club, from our premium members. And so we wanted to come on and really delve into this. And we actually wanted to go through imposter syndrome with you. And we wanted to start there because there are elements of all of those things that we talked about: procrastination, perfectionism, everything that is standing in your own way from achieving the limitless success that you want. So we're diving into the 5 types of imposter syndrome. And these are according to researcher Dr. Valerie Young. She's the one that put these 5 types together. And we're going to start with the perfectionist. How many of you feel like or identify with the perfectionist? It has to be a certain way, it has to be just perfect before you can put it out into the world. Let us know, because this is not uncommon. And this type of imposter syndrome, it's the belief that unless you're absolutely perfect, you could have done better, or you're not gonna go forward with what you want. So I've certainly struggled and overcome the perfectionist piece. Paul, what do you think? Have you gone through that, and let's talk about how we can overcome that together, and some of the things that are popping up around being a perfectionist or choosing to be a perfectionist.
Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and from my own experience. So I think there's a difference between being a perfectionist and a healthy striver. So when you're a healthy striver, you realize that you'll do the best you can at the time, but you'll get it out. But perfectionism in general is actually a protection mechanism for us. And it says that if I'm perfect, I won't be judged. That's what it actually means. It's an external fear of judgment. And so there's a real perfectionist, and that's the people that are moving mountains with all their will and might to move through a project and get it as good as they can, but keep making progress to get it done. They're perfectionists. And then there are people masquerading as a perfectionist that are doing nothing. And you're not a perfectionist. You're just not. You're just procrastinating. And I think this comes from something in my own experience, where starting a side project, starting a passion project, answering a calling when you've already made mastery level in another profession means that you're gonna have to look bad. You have to accept that you can't go into something that's relatively new and you've got skills to learn, and you be at 10 or 15 years level of experience and expertise. So you have to be willing to look bad. And that's the thing. The truth is, there is somebody out there who's had it worse and done better. Just because you remove the barrier and the time frame between idea and execution, and they're the successful people. They have the idea and they take action. So, and I can't remember who said it, but it was around the sort of thoughts of, but gain between 40 and 70% of the information and then go. Because anything any longer than that, by the time you've got all of the perfect investment information for Bitcoin, the investment is already not there. It's already then overinflated and not worth what it already is, because you've waited too long for that. But I get that. I definitely have the trait of wanting to get it perfect and wanting to know everything before starting. I get it. I totally get it. But that's the differentiator. Is like, is it a protection mechanism, perfectionism, where you're actually doing nothing and it's keeping you stuck in concrete? Then just lower the bar. Just lower the bar to get started. Otherwise, you are just never going to move. You're just never going to move. But if you're moving through the project and wanting to perfect it as good as you can, then you're a perfectionist. But otherwise, you ain't.
It's so true, and I love how you reframe that, because I think it'll make a lot of people just question, oh, am I perfectionist in air quotes for those who are listening, but who feels stuck. So it's like that, going back to how you feel will determine whether you're actually a perfectionist striving. What was that word you used?
Yeah, healthy striver.
Healthy striver. I love that. Or the perfectionist who's stuck.
Yeah, and it's a fair external judgment. You're saying,
yeah,
if I'm perfect, I won't be judged.
Yeah, it's that belief that you're not as good as others might think you are, which is just exactly what you were saying. And it actually segues into the second type of imposter syndrome, which is the expert. And the expert feels like an imposter because they don't know everything there is to know about a particular subject or topic, or they haven't mastered every single step of the process. So for them, it's like, okay, if I have to learn more, then how can I consider myself an expert? And if I don't know everything, how can I say that I'm an expert at something? But how can you possibly know everything? It doesn't make logical sense. Like, you're always learning.
That's right.
We're like, anyone listening to this, I imagine you are addicted to learning like we are, because you're listening to this, you're enhancing your mind and where things are going. And I think having that openness or that open-mindedness to say, it's okay that I don't know everything, but I know who to ask.
Yeah.
And I know where to go to find the information. That's power. That's not imposter syndrome. That's being resourceful, right? So,
yes.
do you want to add anything to that around the
yes.
expert? Oh, yes.
If everyone doesn't mind. It reminds me of something that I heard, is that success in life, whatever that looks like to you, is not down to resources, but resourcefulness. And that's what it comes down to. And I get the expert thing. Like I say, let's say I find that one of the toughest places to move from is an okay place. Because I don't know if you've heard of the region beta paradox before, but if you had to travel a mile, you might walk it. But if you had to travel 2, you get in the car. So sometimes you're in a much better position being worse off because you'll travel faster from that place. And that makes total sense. And that comes back to something where change occurs. I know it's a slightly off topic, but it's incredibly important. It's just come to me. And that's when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And that's when we change.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case. Like, that moves aside. So the expert, again, that's the comparison is the thief of joy theme, isn't it? But I think I used to believe comparison was the thief of joy, and I don't believe that anymore. Comparison can be great when you're linking it to people you aspire to, who you're learning from. That comparison is empowering. Envy is the thief of joy.
Yes.
Not comparison, because you try and get away from comparison. Have a go at that. It ain't going to happen, because that's how we're constantly measuring ourselves. You're never going to stop it, but just picking up when you're being envious of that, that's a difference. But the expert thing, I think, okay, do you know as much as the person who's the worldwide expert? Maybe not, but that doesn't mean that you can't serve people in your own way and serve other people who think just like you, because those people are only for you. So somebody said to me once, because I mentioned that, oh, well, I don't think I know enough. And they said, well, in the blind kingdom, the one-eyed man is king. So, can you be chapters ahead in what you've lived through that you can pass back? Can you solve your own problems and pass it back? Then you are an expert. Doesn't mean you have to be PhD of the world, but if the problem that you're solving, if this is for everybody, write down a problem that you're struggling with. Imagine it was your best friend. They come to you with the problem. You write down the problem, and you would then say all the things you're struggling with this problem. And then you would then write down how you would advise someone to solve it. And that is a straightforward process, but sometimes we're too close to it to see it. But if it was your best friend, you'd have plenty to say, because you don't have the emotional attachment. You can see it clearly. That's why we can see other people's gifts, but we can't see our own, because we have clear, impartial judgment, and you can easily see other people's gifts and what they're good at and what they're capable of, where that person can't see it, right? So I think it comes from that. But the expert thing, I totally get. I totally get that. And it's just understanding that you have the world of wisdom at your fingertips that you can research at any time. But at the end of the day, you don't need it all right now. We already know so much, so we don't need more information. We need a bias towards action. That's what it's just taking action on what we already know. And I think it was Rumi said that when you walk the path becomes more clear. And I think that's true, isn't it? Like, if you're still at the same vantage point that you're at right now, of course you're not moving, but when you move 100 yards, you'll see more.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's like giving yourself that permission to say that you are the best in the world at something, but you don't have to know all the answers. And I remember that from a coach that I used to work with. And I know there were a lot of people that struggle to say, I'm the best in the world at this, because they were competing with that expert mentality of, how can I be that when, there's so many people that do what I do, but no one does something better than you. And there's always going to be someone that identifies with you more based on your energy, your experience, whether that's life, business, whatever.
Exactly.
And I think that's what separates you apart. And it brings us to the next imposter syndrome. The next type that Dr. Valerie Young says is the natural genius. And so this imposter syndrome, you may feel like a fraud simply because you don't believe that you're naturally intelligent or competent. Like, you feel like things should come easy to you, or you should get it right the first time. And it might take you a bit longer than somebody else, just talking about the comparisonitis thing. And that makes you feel like an imposter. Oh, so and so's he or she got that way faster than I did. I suck. I can't do this. Da 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 da. And your mind starts to go and your chatter starts to go. And at this point, you better be paying attention to your language, right? You got to notice how you're speaking about to yourself and about yourself when you see this type of imposter syndrome come up.
Yeah, very powerful, very powerful. And this takes me back to Dr. Carol Dweck. I put my teeth back in the book Mindset. So for me, like this one, when I first read that, it was one of the first personal development books I ever read. And the first time I read it, I didn't really get it. Then the second time I read it, I was like, it's like I've never read it. And it was because wisdom meets us where you're at, you know, that's how it works, right? So I changed and become more self-aware. And so that's all about taking a test group of kids and giving them a test. And one group of kids, they said, you know, do this. You've done this test. That's great. You're naturals. You're just a natural, just brilliant. You know, you didn't seem to take much effort, kind of thing. And then the other test group who did the same test said, you got that result because you worked really hard. And then they gave the same two test groups a much harder test. And the group that they said you're naturals, I mean, half of them didn't even start it, or they gave up real quick. But the people who were sort of gestured towards your hard work has paid off, they relished the challenge, dove into it, did much better. They enjoyed the process of the challenge, right? And so this comes down to, do you have a growth mindset or not? Because actually what happens here, and I've experienced this as well, and so the question's been for a long time in the world, is it nature or nurture? Mm-hmm. It's actually both, because you might have some natural ability, but you've got to nurture it, because talent is overrated. It is never going to be enough. And there's numerous stories of people, athletes who are not naturally gifted, not naturally built, but just through consistent practice end up beating somebody who's much more naturally gifted because they don't put the work in. So you can't have just a one-sided look at that of just, well, that person's a natural. They've got to work at it, you know. Actually, they might have put in so much work, mastery of the fundamentals in the unseen hours. Let's say the work you do in private matters more than when people are watching. What you practice in private, you get rewarded for in public, kind of thing. And so it might look like somebody's a natural, but that's because they've been practicing since they were 6 years old. It's like any tennis pro, golf pro, swimmer, runner. They make it look easy because they've practiced so much. So, and I think that sometimes we romanticize talent, that it didn't take hard work, because we don't really want to know the truth. We don't really want to know that's hard work's at the root of mastery, which it is. Read Robert Greene's Mastery, and the whole book is around that process, which is a fascinating book around mastery, by the way, to a whole nother level of mastery in a field. Unbelievable. So yeah, I totally get that, because people say things, because we all have natural abilities, things we're naturally good at, and sometimes you don't even notice it's an ability because it comes naturally to you, and that's absolutely right. So this weaves into the next one as well, but again, asking for help and whether that's difficult for you or not. So again, this is the growth mindset thing, because if you feel like you're a natural, so it should be a breeze to you, and it isn't, So then you'll give up easy, but you have to develop a growth mindset and become anti-fragile.
It's like Michael Jordan. You know,
Yeah.
he immediately came to mind. I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen his show on Netflix, but
Yeah.
he talks about all of his challenges and how he was always the one staying the latest and
Mm.
shooting all sorts of hoops. And I mean, you got to go watch that if you want some inspiration. But it's that false thing of, oh, overnight success, or yeah, just and the sad thing is that we get it a lot from like the media or the movies or whatever. So, you know, it's not like we have to take ownership and say, okay, that's just not the reality. I have to. I mean, if you haven't heard the episode with Stuart Wade,
Mm.
he was talking about his journey through like having taken martial arts, taekwondo, and he just was natural. But of course, he had to work at it and practice and study and all of these things. So yeah, when now we're getting to the fourth imposter syndrome, which is the soloist. And Paul, you touched on it, you know, that you feel like an imposter because you're so afraid to ask for help because you think you can get to the next level on your own, or that there's that should word, you should be able to get there on your own without any help. And that's, you know, I'm reminded of this African proverb that I always love to say. And it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I think, you know, you gotta know that everyone is there to see you succeed, and everyone wants to help you succeed. And I definitely used to struggle with this. And I think there's some fear in there as well. Like, oh, if I ask for help, then that means I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or insert whatever excuse you want. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, totally. And again, like that's the thing, like when you live through all of these, like not coming at this from a level of mastery, these are things that everybody struggles with at different times. You fluctuate in and out of these archetypes. And so, but awareness of that helps it lose its power over you, so you continue to make progress. And I totally get the soloist as well. I mean, that's 100%. And I think that depending on your conditioning, how you grew up. So if you were on your own a lot, um, and you were making your own way, if you're a bit independent and you need time on your own and stuff like that to work stuff out in your way, depends on the type of person you are. If you work better when you're with a group of people to bounce off, feed off, that gives you a lot of energy, then asking for help will come probably more naturally. But I think if you work remotely, if you're on your own a lot and you're a solopreneur, and you're solving your own problems and passing it back, it can be difficult to reach out to somebody and say, look, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm just struggling, you know, for someone to hold that space. And because of the judgment that somehow you haven't got all of your shit together. And
mhm.
you know, and the best of it is that most of us are still winging it. We're still trialing, and we're still trialing things and processes and routines and stuff like that. And sometimes you just have to be honest and think, okay, I've been struggling with this for so long, you know, am I making progress or am I not? Is this causing me suffering? Well, I just need to reach out to somebody that I respect, who won't judge me for being who I am, because we're all struggling with something. And loneliness as an entrepreneur is a real struggle, you know, especially since COVID and remote working and all that sort of stuff. So, and I think if we have to weave this back to one of the fastest ways of changing identity and changing your behavior more naturally is to join a social group where the desired behavior is the norm.
Mhm.
We have a premium membership where the desired behavior is the norm, you know. So any group that you can join around you, Facebook group, anywhere that you can join it, go join it. The people who have got your struggles, your difficulties, and you'll make much more progress and enjoy it a lot more for sure. Because I mean, I've certainly struggled to ask for help for the majority of my life for fear of judgment. And it's the ego ultimately, because we're tribal beings still, and we feel like we will be cast out of the tribe, you know, if we'll be ostracized and we'll die. You know, is it something dramatic as that? As why we don't ask for help. But
Yeah,
it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength, isn't it? You're saying, I'm not giving up on this. This is why I'm asking for help. So see it as a sign of strength for sure.
yeah, and I think, you know, when you were saying look for groups where other people are sharing your same struggles and challenges, but also look for groups that have people that you want to aspire to and
Yes,
that have achieved what you want to achieve,
of
because
course.
they are the ones that make it easy for you to ask for help. They make it comfortable for you. They give you that safe space, which is ultimately why we created that premium membership as well.
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of goes to, I guess, the last archetype or type that is the super person, you know, the Superman, the Superwoman, however you want to identify, but it's that person, you know, you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you're good enough. And you know, you don't have to believe that you have to be the hardest worker to reach the highest level of achievement. And if you don't work hard, and then you're a fraud. Like that's silly. Like how many entrepreneurs have we met, Paul, that go through that, you know, they push themselves to the point of burnout, or they push themselves to the point where they actually don't love their business anymore, or they don't love their life, or they've built this huge, I mean, you can hear it from successful billionaires to millionaires to solopreneurs. They all hit this point where they're like, what have I built? And am I actually living the life that I want to live? And it's that taking that step back and saying, I don't have to be this super woman or this super man to achieve the things that I want, to have that limitless success. It can feel easy, it can feel joyful, it can feel playful, it can feel light. It doesn't have to feel heavy and hard and all this other stuff. And, you know, everything is possible. It's just a matter of, are you moving in the direction, and are you making the choices? Are you actively making the choices that are leading you to a happier, healthier, and more fulfilling life? And that's what well-being is all about. That's what having a healthy state of mind, body, heart, soul, spirit, that's what it's all about. You don't have to do it on your own. You don't have to be this, you know, superhuman person. It's just not realistic. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on yourself when you think that way, and of course creates a bit of imposter syndrome, as we're talking about.
Of course, yeah. And that's it. And there is certainly a badge of honor for how long you work and how little you sleep. And it really bothers me. It really bothers me. So you can have people who own holistic health practices, products, and stuff like that. And then they say, but I only sleep a few hours a night. And I think, well, you can take the tablets, the shots, you can do everything you want. But if you are not sleeping well, forget it. Forget it. because I know what I'm like when I'm not well rested, and it affects my performance big time. And on a biochemical level, it increases the blood flow to the amygdala. So it's firing up the amygdala when you don't sleep well, which is why you're snappy, angry, craving bad food. It is. It's turning on all the animal instincts because it's increasing the blood flow to that area. That's just science. That's what happens when you don't sleep well. So this badge of honor of the grind, but I think where this has all gone wrong is that when we say work, we think pain. Whereas actually, if it's your life's work, or a lot of the elements of it you love because it creates meaning for you, you love doing it, and it can be a difficulty to stop doing it, because actually you're in it, you're in flow state most of the time. So I believe in working fiercely, furiously, and then having rest and recuperation to gain perspective. You'll advance faster. And certainly in my experience with the people that I've worked with, the people that we know now, as burnout really occurs when someone's working 80 hours a week for a cause and a meaning, a business that means nothing to them. It's totally out of alignment. But you can most certainly work 80 hours a week doing work that's fulfilling, gives you meaning, and you don't burn out. But I think it's having scope on how you are and doing an energy audit on you in how you feel, because energy is everything. When you're high energy state, all the shit doesn't stick, and you feel invincible. You can take on challenges better. You're more productive. You're happier. It's just a fact. It's biology. And when you're in a low energy state, everything's 10 times harder. So you don't have to be a superhero, but just understanding how you work, how you work best when you work best, and then just put your work time then, instead of, like, I used to schedule really important, challenging tasks at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I was quieter, but it's the worst time of day for me. So of course it's going to be hard work. It's not good. I'm in a low energy state, so everything's going to be hard. So it's like, okay, I'm not making the best use of this. Like, how do I reorganize that? When am I at my best to take on a challenge? Well, I know it's first thing in the morning when I'm fresh cognitively. I've got a plethora of bandwidth to play with. Distractions are lower. I can get it done. So it's just understanding yourself, isn't it? And just working, and just the conditioning of the I have to work all the hours God sends to be successful is not the case. It's not the case. Why can't you do 4 or 5 hours of great work and that's it?
Yeah,
So
and
I love the question. Look, if you could only work for 2 hours a week, what would you do? Because it cuts out, you separate the signal from the noise. If you could only work for 2 hours a week, what would you do? What a great question.
that is a super great question. And I think if anyone's struggling with this, the timer, you have a phone, you have some sort of clock around you, set yourself a timer and say, in this hour, in this 45 minutes, whatever time you have, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, or I'm just going to do X. Like, if it's just the one thing, and start to pay attention to how purposeful and intentional you are with your time. Because if you don't own your time owns you. And you can spend hours on something like a website or whatever is, you could spend hours and hours And you don't really need to. That is a form of procrastination in and of itself. Like that's
Totally.
kind of the perfectionist, or, it has to be perfect and I have to find whatever that is for you. But I think, Paul showed you his timer for those of you who are listening and not watching us on the video, but get yourself a timer because it is a lifesaver, and you will start to realize just how much you get done in the time that you set yourself. And you will feel so much more productive, intentional, just like you own your time and not like your time owns you. You won't finish the day saying, oh gosh, what the hey did I do today? I didn't do anything today. Da, 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 da. And put in your journal about it. If these are things that you're struggling with, maybe put that into your daily practice, either at night to say, how did I spend my time today? We just did in our premium membership, we always do a month-end review, and it's looking at how you spent your time, and we ask a few questions so that you can hold yourself accountable, because accountability is a big part of what we do in the premium membership. But it's also just checking in and evaluating, am I happy with how I spent my time? Am I happy with the priorities that I set? Did I stick to the priorities that I set? Because that's a big one as well. So yeah, I mean, we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. Any final thoughts, Paul, about imposter syndrome or procrastination or consistency, all the things we opened up
Yeah.
with?
A lot of things to say all about that, which we can't do today. But maybe we could do a second session on procrastination altogether. I think that's a separate issue of imposter syndrome. Although they're woven into the same fabric of our existence, I think they're slightly separate, because that's actually getting it done, and what gets in our way of getting it done. Summed up actually is an unconscious fear of the unknown, and that's what it is. And there's a number of issues with what stops us getting it done, and so that's probably another episode where we can actually just get down to a bit more granular detail on that. I think that'll be an excellent episode. And if you feel that would be something that would be massively beneficial to you, I know it's certainly beneficial to me and a lot of people that we know that ask us for particular episodes, then let us know. But I think we could all use a bit more of that for sure.
Yeah. And like always, if you got value from this episode, if you know someone that needs to hear what we're talking about, if you want to come into our premium membership for just £5 a month, it's not that much, but there's so much value to be had in there. Lots of premium content. Do share this episode. Come and join us in the premium membership. And we can't wait to see you next time. See you later.
Thanks for listening.